The stones remember everything you know. That's what my grandfather used to tell me, running his weathered fingers across these ancient roads. I'm Rosa, and I'm standing here in the Peruvian highlands, looking at a path that hasn't carried regular footsteps in centuries. The stones are still fitted together so precisely that you can't slip a knife blade between them. But the people who built them, the empire that maintained them, gone. Hey, my wonderful sleep club. I see you there choosing to learn about mountain empires from the comfort of your bed. I'm so glad you're here tonight because we're going to walk together through the entire story of how the Inca Empire rose to greatness and fell to conquest. The quiet moments of daily life, the invisible invasion, the clash of worlds, and the resilience that followed. This is a story with sorrow in it, yes, but also hope. The kind of calm, thoughtful reflection that helps you process the complexity of history while you drift towards sleep. If this sounds good to you, go ahead and drop a like, leave a comment, telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your world. And please get comfortable, dim those lights, grab your softest blanket, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle white noise. Let the sound of my voice carry you through time. Let's begin now, shall we? I'm looking at this abandoned road, wondering what it saw, what stories these stones could tell if they could speak. My grandfather said they do speak if you know how to listen, so let me take you back. Back to before the silence, back to when this road hummed with purpose and life. Back to 1520, you're standing at dawn on a stone road that seems to defy gravity itself. Your name is Kusik, which means joy in Quechua, though right now you're not feeling particularly joyful, you're feeling cold. The altitude here makes your breath visible in the thin air. Each exhale a small cloud that disappears into the morning. The sky above you is a blue so deep it almost looks purple, the kind of blue you only see at heights where the air is thin enough that it barely scatters the sunlight. The silence at this altitude is profound, not empty, but full. It presses against your eardrums in a way that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. The stone beneath your feet holds the memory of last night's frost, still cold even through your sandals, while the rising sun begins to warm your face with an intensity that feels like gentle pressure. In the distance you can hear the faint whistle of wind moving through ichu grass, and somewhere far below the whisper of a river cutting through a gorge you crossed yesterday. The air has a particular smell up here, thin, clean, carrying a hint of ichu grass, and the distant sweetness of wood smoke from a village you cannot yet see. You're a chaski, a relay runner, and you're about to begin your daily run. In your hands you hold a quipu, a bundle of knotted strings that carries information you cannot read. You don't need to read it. Your job is simpler than that. Run to the next station, hand it to the next runner, rest, and wait for the next quipu coming from the opposite direction. You are one link in a chain that stretches across the backbone of an empire. This empire is called Tawantinsuyu, the Four Quarters, and it is the largest empire in the Americas. From where you stand, roads branch out in four directions, connecting coastal deserts to mountain peaks to jungle valleys. 25,000 miles of carefully maintained pathways, all fitted with stones like the ones beneath your feet. Imagine a road that could stretch from New York to Tokyo and back again, all of it carved through mountains where modern engineers with all their machinery still struggle to build simple highways. If you walked 10 miles each day at a steady pace, it would take you nearly 7 years to walk every road in the empire. 7 years of placing one foot in front of the other, and you still wouldn't see every stone that had been laid. You stretch your legs, feeling the familiar burn in your calves. The run ahead of you is about 5 miles uphill for the first half, then a sharp descent into a valley where the next tambo, the next rest house, waits. You've done this run hundreds of times. You know every switchback, every place where the road turns to stairs carved directly into the mountainside. You don't know that this is one of the last perfect days. You don't know that thousands of miles away across an ocean you've never heard of, plans are being made that will tear your world apart. You don't know that within a decade, these very roads built to hold the empire together will become the highways of its undoing, carrying not just messages and goods, but foreign armies, moving with a speed the Inca administrators designed but never anticipated being used against them. But you will. For now, though, the sun is warm on your face. The road stretches ahead, faithful and solid. You take a deep breath of thin mountain air, and you start to run. The road beneath your feet is a miracle of engineering, though you don't think of it that way. To you, it's just the road. It's always been there, maintained by your father's generation and your grandfather's generation before that. But if a Roman engineer could see it, he would stop in his tracks, stunned. These roads span a distance greater than from New York to Tokyo and back again. They climb higher than any road network in the ancient world, crossing mountain passes where the air is so thin that newcomers gasp and stumble. They descend into coastal deserts so dry that nothing grows for miles. They bridge rivers with spans that make Spanish conquistadors freeze in terror when they first see them, refusing to cross. The stones you're running on were quarried from a site perhaps 3 valleys away. Each one was carried here by hand, fitted into place by craftsmen who learned their trade from their fathers, who learned it from theirs. The fit is so precise that not even a blade of grass could slip between them. This isn't just for show. This precision means the road sheds water perfectly, channeling rain away through small drainage cuts you barely notice as you run past. After a storm, while mountain paths turn to mud, this road dries within hours. When the terrain becomes too steep for a gradual slope, the road doesn't wind around looking for an easier path. It transforms into stairs, thousands and thousands of steps carved into mountainsides. Your legs burn after climbing them, that deep ache that settles into muscle and reminds you that you've asked your body to do something extraordinary, but you reach heights that seem impossible, standing on stones that cling to cliff faces like they've always belonged there. The roads were built without wheeled vehicles in mind. The Inca never developed the wheel for transportation, which seems strange until you consider the terrain. What good is a cart on a staircase? What use is a wagon on a path, barely 3 feet wide, carved into a cliff face with a 1,000-foot drop on one side? Instead, llamas carry goods in neat packs. You watch a train of llamas passing on the road now. Their soft, padded feet make almost no sound on the stones. They can navigate narrow mountain paths that would be suicide for wagons. They carry bundles of maize from a warm valley to a cold highland town. Their handlers walk alongside, occasionally making soft clicking sounds to keep the animals moving. The llama's breath rises in small clouds in the morning air, and you can smell them as they pass, that distinctive, earthy scent of wool and animal warmth. Every 15 to 20 miles along these roads, you find a tambo. You're heading toward one now, your destination for this morning's run. These rest houses are stocked with everything a traveler needs: food stores, blankets, water. They're built into hillsides when possible, using the earth itself as insulation against the cold mountain nights. But maintaining all of this requires something: labor, constant, organized, never-ending labor. Let me introduce you to Yakchak. He's 45 years old, a master stonemason whose hands are as rough as the rocks he shapes. His father was a road builder. His grandfather was a road builder. His son, Tupac, 14 years old, and lean as a mountain cat, is learning to be a road builder. Right now they're working on a section of road about 30 miles from where you're running Kusik. A winter landslide took out 50 feet of paving, and it's their responsibility to repair it. Yakak kneels beside a stone, running his fingers over its surface, reading it like you might read the knots on a quipu. His fingers trace the grain feel for fracture lines, test the weight and balance. "This one goes here," he says to Tupac, pointing to a gap in the road. "See how the angle matches? The stone tells you where it belongs." Tupac hefts the stone. It's heavy enough that his arms tremble slightly, but he doesn't complain. Complaining is for children, and he's trying very hard not to be a child anymore. He fits the stone into place. It's close but not perfect. You can see a slight gap on one edge, barely noticeable, but there. Again Yakchak says, not unkindly, "The road remembers every imperfect stone. In 10 years, in 100 years, someone will feel where we got lazy. Do it right." Tupac lifts the stone again. His muscles burn, adjusts the angle, sets it down. This time it fits, like it was always meant to be there, like the stone and the road were separated at birth and have finally found each other again. Yakchak nods. Better. The road will remember this one correctly. There's pride in this work. Deep pride that runs through generations. But there's also weight. This is their meter obligation, their labor service to the empire. The concept is simple enough. The empire provides infrastructure, protection, food storage for times of famine. In return, communities contribute work. Some people maintain roads, others staff the tambos. Still others serve as chaski runners like you, Kusik. It's a structure of reciprocal obligations. The empire would tell you, you give labor, you receive security and connection to a wider world. But if you ask Tupac's mother Cisa, she might tell you something different. She might mention how her husband is away for months at a time, leaving her to manage their farm alone. She might talk about the year they called Yashak for road work during planting season, and they nearly starved the following winter because the harvest was so poor. She might describe the weight of the millstone as she grinds maize by herself, the rhythmic scraping sound filling empty hours where she should have a partner's voice. The empire provides infrastructure. But at what cost? For the empire's administrators, these roads are arteries of control, ways to move information and armies quickly across vast distances. For local communities, they're sometimes burdens requiring constant maintenance, dictating where you can build, bringing officials and demands from distant capitals. And yet, they also connect you to a wider world, A farmer in a remote valley can now access markets hundreds of miles away. A young person can travel to Cusco, the capital, and see wonders their grandparents never imagined. Cocoa leaves from warm valleys travel to cold highlands where they help with altitude sickness. Dried fish from the coast moves inland to people who've never seen the ocean. Potatoes from high-altitude farms varieties that can survive frost feed people in warmer regions who couldn't grow them. The roads made this exchange possible. Regular, reliable, but they also created dependencies. Connections that could carry more than goods and messages. What happens when a network becomes so efficient that it can't afford to fail, when the same roads that bring prosperity can also bring destruction? The Inca are about to find out. But not yet. For now, Yachak and Tupac are fitting stones. The work is honest. The road is real. The sun climbs higher, burning away the morning chill. And you, Kusik, are still running. Your lungs are burning now. You've been running uphill for 3 miles, and the altitude makes every breath feel inadequate, like you're trying to breathe through wet cloth. Your calves scream with each step. Sweat runs down your back despite the cold air. But you can see the next tambo ahead, a small stone structure built into the hillside where the road crests the ridge. There's another chaski waiting there. His name is Amaru, which means serpent, and he's younger than you by maybe 5 years. He's stretching his legs, bouncing on his toes, ready. When he sees you approaching, he stands at attention, already calculating your pace, preparing to match your momentum. You don't slow down as you reach him. This is a relay, and every second counts. You extend the Quipu toward him, and he takes it in one smooth motion, already starting to run in the opposite direction before you've even come to a complete stop. The handoff is practiced, efficient, beautiful in its economy of movement. What news, he calls back over his shoulder. Don't know, you gasp. Hands on your knees trying to catch your breath. Just run. And he does. Within seconds, he's disappeared around a bend in the road, carrying information you'll never know. This is the Chaski network, and it's the communication backbone of the empire. Runners stationed every 4 to 6 miles, about the distance a person can sprint at full speed before their lungs give out. The Inca have measured the exact limits of human endurance. Messages can travel over 150 miles in a single day. That's faster than a galloping horse can maintain over that distance. Faster than any empire in the world at this time can move information. The same efficiency that built the empire creates vulnerabilities no one sees coming. A message about disaster can spread just as quickly as news of triumph. A single runner carrying the wrong information can set in motion events that reshape everything. But the Quipu that Amaru is now carrying is itself a marvel. To Spanish eyes, when they eventually see these, they'll look like primitive string art, just colored cords with knots tied in them. They'll think, look at these people, they don't even have writing. They couldn't be more wrong. Imagine holding a Quipu in your hands. There's a main cord, thick as your thumb, made from cotton or alpaca fiber. The texture is slightly rough with the distinctive feel of hand-spun thread. From this main cord hang dozens, sometimes hundreds of thinner strings, each one a different color. Some are cotton white, left in their natural state. Others are dyed deep crimson with cochineal insects crushed and boiled to release their brilliant color. Others are blue from indigo yellow from cauliflowers, green from mixing dyes. When you hold a quipu up to the light, these colors catch and glow, creating patterns that are themselves a form of beauty. Along each string, knots. But these aren't random. Each position means something. A knot near the top of a string might represent hundreds, one in the middle tens, at the end, single units. The type of knot matters too. A figure-8 knot carries different meaning than a simple overhand knot. The space between knots matters. The tightness of the knot matters. Run your fingers along a quipu and you can feel the information. A Quipu Camayok, a keeper of the Quipu, can read these knots in complete darkness, understanding complex records of llama populations, stores of food, labor obligations, tribute owed and tribute paid, all through touch alone. Their fingers have memorized what each position means, what each color represents, what the relationships between strings indicate. Color adds another layer. A red string might track one type of goods, a yellow string another. The relationships between strings matter too. Secondary strings hanging from primary strings create hierarchies of information like folders within folders in a database. The Spanish will see these quipus and think they're looking at primitives who can't write. What they're actually looking at is a three-dimensional database encoding multiple types of information simultaneously through color, position, knot type, and the spatial relationships between strings. It's not primitive, it's sophisticated in ways they can't even recognize. It's a different way of thinking about information entirely. Let me introduce you to one of the people who can read these invisible libraries. His name is Kari and he's 52 years old, blind in one eye from an accident with a stone chisel when he was young. The scar runs from his eyebrow to his cheekbone, a white line against weathered brown skin. But his fingers can read quipus better than most people can read with both eyes working perfectly. He's been doing this since he was 8 years old, when an elderly Quipu Camayok recognized that the boy had the right kind of memory, the right kind of spatial intelligence. He sits now in a small room in a provincial administrative center, 3 quipus spread before him on a woven mat. His fingers move over the knots with the unconscious grace of long practice, his lips moving slightly as he counts, calculates cross-references. These 3 quipus track the population llama herds and potato stores for 3 provinces under his oversight. He's the kind of person who knows the empire better than anyone. While the Sapa Inca, the God King, sits in Cusco making grand decisions, it's people like Kari who actually understand how things work at the level of lived reality. He knows that Village A has 237 able-bodied adults, 53 of whom are currently away on mitre service. He knows that Village B has a surplus of freeze-dried potatoes but is short on blankets for the coming winter. He knows that the llama herd in Province C needs to be culled by 30 animals to maintain sustainable grazing. He knows all of this through his fingers, through patterns of knots that would look like random string to anyone else. But lately, something has been bothering him. The numbers don't quite add up. Villages are reporting fewer people in their censuses. Not dramatically fewer, just fewer. Few people here, a handful there. At first, he thought it was just normal variation. People die, people are born, populations fluctuate. But the pattern continues. More villages, more missing people. The knots tell a story that doesn't make sense. He reported it to his superior last month, bringing his quipus as evidence, laying them out carefully to show the pattern. The population counts are declining, he said, showing how the knots had changed from the previous year's census. Check your knots again, was the response. You're getting old, Kari. Perhaps your fingers aren't as reliable as they used to be. The word stung, but Kari is patient. So he checked. Carefully, methodically, going over every knot, every chord, every color, running his fingers along strings he's already read a dozen times, cross-referencing against storage records, against tribute records, against everything. The numbers are still wrong. People are disappearing. He doesn't know why. Disease migration are people fleeing their villages. But where would they go? The empire tracks movement. The whole point of the Quipu records is to know where everyone is, what everyone has, what everyone owes. He ties the question into a new Quipu, a query, to be sent to other Quipucamayos in other provinces. His fingers work quickly, tying the question into knots that other trained readers will understand. Have you noticed this too? Are your numbers also strange? He hands it to a chaski. The runner takes it without asking questions, he can't read quipus anyway, and sprints away, carrying Kari's question at speeds that would have seemed impossible to any other civilization at this time. The empire moves at the speed of running feet. Information flows constantly along these arteries of power, faster than thought, impossibly fast. But lately, Kari has started to wonder what good is fast communication if no one believes the message? What good is speed if it carries the wrong information or if the right information is ignored? Numbers don't lie. He thinks his fingers resting on the Quipu in his lap. The numbers are trying to tell us something. No one is listening. You've caught your breath now, Kusik. You drink from a stone channel that carries cold water from a mountain spring. The water is so cold it makes your teeth ache, makes your head feel sharp and clear. But it's pure and clean and exactly what you need. You can taste the mountains in it, the stone and snow and ancient patience. You duck into the tambo. It's built into the hillside stones, fitted together in the same precise way as the road, each one chosen for its shape and weight, and placed exactly where it needs to be. The roof is thatched with Ichu grass, thick enough to keep out rain and hold in warmth. Inside it's dim and cool, a relief from the sun. Smoke from previous fires has darkened the ceiling, and the smell of old smoke mingles with the scent of stored food and alpaca wool. The storage rooms are stocked. In one corner you find chuño freeze-dried potatoes. These are made using a technique that only works at high altitudes in places where the air is thin and cold enough. Villagers lay fresh potatoes out during the coldest nights when the frost comes down hard enough to freeze them solid. Then they walk over them barefoot, the pressure of bare feet being more controlled than shoes to squeeze out the moisture. The trampling becomes a communal activity, almost a dance feat, moving in rhythm over rows of freezing potatoes. After several cycles of freezing nights and sun-drying days, the potatoes shrink to hard, lightweight pellets that can last for years. Boiled in water, they reconstitute into something that will keep you alive through lean times. Next to the chuño, you find chaski, dried llama meat sliced so thin it's almost translucent like leather made of protein. The slices have been salted and dried until they're hard as wood. A traveler could carry a handful and have enough sustenance for days of hard walking. There are also blankets woven from alpaca wool. You run your hand over one, feeling the tightness of the weave. The weaving is so tight that the fabric is almost waterproof. On cold nights at high altitude, these blankets mean the difference between sleep and shivering wakefulness, between surviving and freezing. But you won't be sleeping here. You're waiting for the next Quipu coming from the opposite direction, the one you'll carry back to your starting station. So you sit on a stone bench worn smooth by countless travelers before you. You can feel the depression where bodies have sat, the polish that human contact creates over decades. And you wait. Other travelers arrive over the next few hours. There's Mama Koya, a merchant woman in her 30s, carrying a heavy pack filled with shells from the coast. She's walking them inland to trade in highland markets where people have never seen the ocean and treasure these iridescent pieces as something almost magical, gifts from a world they can barely imagine. She sets down her pack with a groan and rubs her shoulders, wincing slightly. "Getting too old for this," she mutters, but she's smiling. Her fingers work at the knots in her shoulders, pressing into muscles that have carried weight for too many miles. Then comes Apu Chaska, an official from the provincial government traveling with 2 quipus and a stern expression. His clothing marks him as someone important, finer weaving more elaborate patterns, a small ornament of silver at his throat. He's here to inspect tax records in several villages along his route. He nods curtly to you and Mama Koya, but doesn't engage in conversation. Work is work, and he carries himself with the stiffness of someone who takes his duties very seriously. Finally, as afternoon sun slants through the doorway, painting the interior with golden light, a pilgrim arrives. His name is Waina, which means youth, though he's probably 40. He's traveling to a sacred site 3 days' journey from here, a place where ancestors are buried and offerings are made. He carries a small bundle of coca leaves and a look of quiet determination. You share food around a small fire pit in the center of the tambo. Mama Koya has some dried fish she's willing to share. The flesh still salty and rich with ocean flavor. You contribute some chuño from your own supplies. Waina has coca leaves which he passes around. You tuck a few in your cheek, feeling the slight numbness spread across your gums, the way they make the altitude easier to bear, the hunger less pressing. "Where are you coming from?" you ask Mama Koya, making conversation to pass the time. "The coast," she says. "Took me 12 days to get here. The roads are in good condition, thank the sun. But the villages..." She trails off, her expression troubled. "What about them?" Apu Chaska asks suddenly, interested, his official demeanor sharpening into focus. She shrugs, but there's something uneasy in the gesture. "Quieter than I remember. Last time I made this journey, maybe 3 years ago, the villages were bustling. Market days were crowded. This time, fewer people. Houses empty. Not everywhere, but enough to notice." Apu Chaska frowns. "Fewer people? Maybe they moved," she says. "Or maybe I'm misremembering. 3 years is a long time." But you notice she doesn't sound convinced by her own explanation. Her eyes don't quite meet Apu Chaska's. The conversation shifts to other things, trading news about mutual acquaintances, discussing the weather patterns this season, speculating about the next harvest. But something Mama Koya said sticks with you, lodges in your mind like a small stone in your sandal. Quieter villages, fewer people. You think about your own village where your wife Sumac and your daughter Killer are waiting. Killer is 8 years old, bright and quick, always asking questions about everything. Why do llamas spit? Why is the sky blue? Where do the stars go during the day? When you left for this rotation of chaski service, she made you promise to bring back a story about the strangest thing you saw. You haven't seen anything strange yet. Just roads and runners and tambos. The familiar rhythms of empire, the same patterns you've known all your life. But Mama Makoya's words linger, quieter, fewer people. You push the thought away. Everything is fine. The empire has stood for generations. It will stand for generations more. Later you lie on your sleeping mat staring at the underside of the thatched roof. Smoke from the fire pit finds its way out through gaps in the grass, curling and twisting in patterns that almost look deliberate. Outside, the wind makes a sound like the ocean when it moves through the high mountain grasses, though you've never heard the ocean, so you don't know this. It's just a sound, deep and constant, the breathing of the mountains themselves. You think about home, about whether sumac is sleeping safely, about whether the potatoes you planted before leaving have sprouted, yet pushing green fingers up through dark soil, about whether Killer is remembering to help her mother with the weaving, about whether you'll return at all or whether this rotation will be your last. This is the part that doesn't change across centuries, a traveler's loneliness in a strange bed far from home. The Inca felt it the same way anyone would feel it. The same way anyone, anywhere lying in an unfamiliar place in the dark, has felt it throughout human history. The empire can move information across mountains faster than a horse can run. It can organize labor across different ecosystems with incredible precision. It can build roads that last for centuries, build rest houses that shelter thousands. But it can't cure homesickness. Some things no empire can solve. Some aches live in the human heart, no matter how efficient the roads, how strong the government, how organized the tribute. You drift towards sleep, and in your dreams, you're running, always running. But in the dream, the road ahead keeps changing, twisting into shapes that roads shouldn't take, leading to places that don't exist, and you can never quite reach your destination. You run and run and run, and the destination keeps moving farther away. Somewhere in another province, Kari is still awake, fingers moving over Quipus by candlelight, trying to solve the mystery of disappearing people. The numbers keep whispering their warning, but no one is listening. No one but him. Somewhere in a mountain village, Yakak and his son Tupac are sleeping after a long day of lifting stones, their muscles aching in that good way that comes from honest work. Tupac dreams of becoming a master mason like his father. He doesn't dream of dark tunnels and collapsed ceilings. Not yet. Somewhere on the coast, Mama Koya's shells are sitting in an empty house waiting for owners who will never return. The empire sleeps wrapped in confidence and organization, and the kind of stability that comes from generations of success, unaware that it's already under attack by an enemy it can't see, can't fight, can't even imagine. But the attack has begun. It's been underway for years, moving invisibly along trade routes, spreading from breath to breath, from touch to touch. And it's about to reach the heart of everything. Let me tell you what happens to Tupac, the road builder's son. He's 16 now, 2 years after we first met him fitting stones with his father. He's grown taller, filled out in the shoulders from years of lifting rocks that weigh as much as a small child. His hands have developed the same calluses as Yakak's, the same roughness across the palms. He can read a rock face like his father can, understanding intuitively where to quarry, which stones will fit together, how to shape them with minimal effort and maximum precision. He's good at this work. He loves it even. There's something deeply satisfying about taking chaos, a pile of random stones, and creating order. A road that will last centuries, a path that will carry thousands of feet. But he won't be building roads. The meter call comes to his village on a day when clouds hang low over the mountains, threatening rain that might turn to hail. The provincial official arrives with a Quipu carrying population records on a Quipu. They need able-bodied men for coastal service, not road work. Something else, guano mining. The Inca Empire has discovered that bird droppings accumulated over centuries on coastal islands piled so deep they form hills of their own, make excellent fertilizer. Spread on fields, they produce incredible harvests, doubling or tripling crop yields. But harvesting this guano is brutal work. Hot sun beating down on treeless islands, no shade, breathing in dust that coats your lungs and makes every breath taste like death. Loading heavy baskets that have to be carried up cliff faces to waiting boats. The work goes on from sunrise to sunset, and the dust never settles, never stops, filling your nose and mouth. It's the kind of work that breaks people, that takes young men and returns them old, if it returns them at all. The official reads names from a Quipu, his fingers running over knots that represent people, bodies, units of labor. Tupac is selected along with 15 other young men from surrounding villages. The selection seems random to those who don't understand the Quipu, but it's precise. Each village owes a certain number of workers. Each household contributes according to its capacity. Tupac's name is called. Sisa Tupac's mother doesn't weep. The Inca don't show weakness publicly. Crying is for children and those who can't control themselves. But her face goes still in a way that's worse than tears, a blankness that speaks of pain too deep for expression. Yachak puts a hand on his son's shoulder. His grip is tight enough to leave marks. "You will come back. I will come back," Tupac promises. He believes it. He's young and strong. The work might be hard, but he's used to hard work. How different can it be from lifting stones? He doesn't understand yet. None of them do. 8 months later, during the rainy season, when meter work usually slows and men are released to return home for planting, a chaski arrives at their village carrying a Quipu. Yakak is working on a retaining wall when he sees the runner approaching. Something about the runner's expression makes Yakak's stomach clench, makes his hands stop their work. The Quipu translates the knots for Yakak and Sisa. The words are formal, bureaucratic, empty of emotion because Quipus, record facts, not feelings. Tupac died in a tunnel collapse 3 months ago. He was working in a guano chamber that had been overmined where the ceiling was already showing cracks that everyone could see, but no one stopped to repair because the work quotas had to be met. The chamber collapsed during the afternoon shift, buried under tons of guano in a space that was already unstable. 3 other men died with him. Their bodies were never recovered. It would take too long to dig them out, and time is labor, and labor has value, and dead bodies do not. The Quipu, in its efficient way, also notes that Yachak's household now has 1 fewer able-bodied male, which affects their labor obligation for next year's census. It's all recorded. Everything is recorded. The death, the adjustment, the new calculation of what this household owes to the empire. It's all there in the knots. But the Quipu doesn't carry grief. It doesn't carry the sound Caesar makes when she finally allows herself to weep, a sound that comes from somewhere so deep it doesn't seem human, a sound like the earth itself breaking. It doesn't carry Yachak's silence the way he goes to work on the roads the next morning, because the work must continue, because stopping would mean thinking, and thinking would mean feeling, and feeling would destroy him. He doesn't speak to anyone for 6 days, just lifts stones and places them, lifts and places, the physical labor, the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. It doesn't carry the empty place at their fire where Tupac used to sit, telling stories about his day, asking questions about technique, planning his future. The sleeping mat that gets folded up and put away because no one can bear to look at it. This is the arrangement, the reciprocal obligation. The empire provides infrastructure and protection and food storage. You provide labor. But if you're Caesar, you might wonder what you received in exchange for your son. The roads, you'd burn every stone if it would bring him back. You'd tear up every perfectly fitted paving block with your bare hands and throw them into the deepest gorge if it meant hearing his voice again. The protection, what protection the empire couldn't save him from a collapsing tunnel, couldn't stop greedy overseers from pushing men into chambers that everyone knew were unstable, couldn't value his life enough to take an extra day to shore up a ceiling. The food stores for times of famine, they don't taste like anything anymore. Everything is dust and ashes. The infrastructure that will last for centuries, her son won't see those centuries. He got 8 months of breathing guano dust before being buried in it, but she doesn't say any of this. She goes back to her loom and weaves her fingers, moving through familiar patterns, almost unconsciously creating something that will outlast her, because her son did not. The weaving is automatic, mindless, a way to fill hours that stretch endlessly. The patterns she creates tell stories, geometric shapes that represent mountains, rivers, sky, and she adds a new pattern now. A small one, almost invisible unless you know where to look. A pattern that means lost and remembered and loved. The empire calls this reciprocity. Caesar might call it something else, but she doesn't call it anything. She just weaves and grieves and continues. Because what else can you do when the empire that took your son still stands, still demands, still expects you to contribute and serve and pretend that the exchange is fair? High above everything in the city of Cusco, the Sapa Inca sits in the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun. His name is Huayna Capac, which means young chief or vigorous lord. Though he's no longer particularly young, he's in his 50s now, a man who has ruled for decades, who has expanded the empire to its greatest extent, pushing boundaries north into what will someday be Ecuador and south into Chile. His face is lined, his hair showing grey, but his presence is absolute. The temple around him is covered in gold, not decorated with gold, covered. Sheets of hammered gold plate the walls, catching sunlight that streams through carefully positioned openings and reflecting it in ways that make the room seem to glow from within, as if the sun itself lives here. The effect is overwhelming, transformative, designed to inspire awe and reinforce the divine nature of the Sapa Inca. In the temple garden, a space where other rulers might plant flowers, there are sculptures made entirely from gold and silver, corn plants with each kernel individually crafted from precious metal. Life-sized llamas so realistic that in certain light they seem ready to walk their metal wool, catching highlights like real fur. There are butterflies made of gold so thin, it's almost transparent birds with silver feathers, even golden representations of the common plants that grow in the mountains. Everything is precious. Everything is perfect. This is the wealth of an empire. Huayna Capac is the son of the sun god Inti. This is not metaphor. This is not symbolic representation. This is literal truth to his people. He is divine. When he speaks, God speaks through him. When he decrees, heaven decrees. His word is not law. It's something more fundamental than law. It's reality itself. But divine or not, he's also a practical administrator. He understands that an empire this size requires more than divine authority. It requires organization, infrastructure, constant management. Below him in the hierarchy sit the nobility members of his extended family and the families of previous Sapa Incas. These are the people who govern provinces, who command armies, who make the daily decisions that keep an empire functioning. They wear the finest textiles, eat the best food, occupy the positions of power. Below them, provincial governors. Many of these are conquered rulers who are allowed to keep their positions after submitting to Inca authority. It's an efficient approach. You keep your power, your people keep their customs and many of their traditions, but you owe allegiance to Cusco. You send tribute. You provide meter labor. You acknowledge the supremacy of the sun and the Sapa Inca. Refuse and you'll be removed and replaced with someone more cooperative. Resist violently and you'll be destroyed as an example to others. Below the governors, local Caracas village leaders who handle the day-to-day administration of their communities. They're the ones who organize meter labor, who ensure tribute is collected, who settle disputes according to Inca law. They're the interface between the grand structure of empire and the lived reality of farmers and herders and craftspeople. And at the bottom, the vast majority of people. Farmers, herders, artisans, weavers, miners, road builders, the people who actually do the work that makes an empire possible. Their names aren't recorded in histories. Their individual stories don't matter to the official chroniclers. They're counted as labor units, as tribute providers, as bodies that owe service to the state. But there's another group, a specialized class that cuts across these hierarchies, the Quipu Kamayoks. Kari, the Quipu Kamayok we met earlier, serves a provincial governor, but his knowledge gives him power that transcends his official position. When he speaks about numbers, people listen. The governor listens. Even representatives from Cusco listen because Kari knows things they don't. He knows the reality behind the reports, the truth hidden in patterns of knots. Because in an empire without writing, as the Spanish would understand it, the people who can read Quipus hold the empire's memory in their hands and fingers. Kari is alone in his workspace now, 3 new Quipus spread before him on a woven mat. These are responses to his earlier questions about declining populations. Other Quipu Kamayoks from other provinces scattered across the empire, confirming what he suspected but hoped wasn't true. It's not just his region, it's widespread. Numbers are wrong across multiple provinces, villages reporting fewer people. In some cases, significantly fewer. The pattern is consistent enough that it can't be random variation or migration. Something is happening. Something is taking people. His fingers trace the knots slowly, his blind eye giving him an odd profile as he bends over his work. The seeing eye reads what the fingers confirm. Village after village, the numbers declining. Not catastrophically in any one place, but consistently across many places, and that consistency is what frightens him. He ties this information into a summary Quipu one that will be sent to Cusco to administrators who serve the Sapa Inca directly. His fingers work quickly translating his concern into knots and colors and spatial relationships. This is important, this needs attention. This is a warning that should not be ignored. He hands it to a chaski. The runner takes it young fit, ready, and disappears down the road carrying Kari's warning at maximum speed. The Quipu arrives in Cusco 3 days later, which is extraordinarily fast for a message traveling that distance. It's read by an administrator who frowns at the information, who cross-references it with other reports from his own Quipus and then does nothing decisive. Because from Cusco's perspective, a slight decline in provincial populations is not a crisis. It's a data point. Maybe there was a bad harvest and people tightened their belts and the death rate went up slightly. Maybe some people migrated to other regions seeking better opportunities. These things happen. The empire is vast. It's strong. It's been growing for generations. A few missing people in distant provinces, that's not a threat to the divine order. That's not something that requires the Sapa Inca's personal attention. The administrator makes a note in his own Quipu files the information away and moves on to more pressing concerns. In his room, hundreds of miles away, Kari doesn't know his warning has been received and dismissed. He only knows he did his duty. He reported what the numbers told him. Numbers don't lie, he thinks. They never lie. But people can refuse to hear what numbers are saying. But there are other cracks in the Empire ones that have nothing to do with mysterious population declines. The Empire has been expanding aggressively for the past century, an engine of conquest that seems unstoppable. Huayna Capac's father, Tupac Inca Yupanqui, pushed the borders north into what is now Ecuador and south into Chile, incorporating diverse peoples and territories into Tawantinsuyu through a combination of military force and political accommodation. Huayna Capac continued this expansion, his armies conquering new territories, his administrators incorporating them into the imperial structure. But not everyone was happy about being incorporated. In the northern provinces, in the cities that were conquered relatively recently within living memory for the elders, resentment simmers below the surface of compliance. These people remember being independent. They remember their own kings, their own gods, their own ways of doing things. They remember when their tribute went to local rulers who spoke their language and understood their customs, not to a distant god-king in a city they've never seen. Now they're expected to worship Inti, the sun god, even if their traditional deities were different. Expected to learn Quechua if they don't already speak it. Expected to contribute meter labor to build roads and temples and fortifications for an empire they never asked to join. Expected to send their children to Cusco for education. That's really indoctrination, teaching them to be Inca instead of whatever they were before. Most obey. The Inca military is formidable, organized, well-supplied, ruthless when necessary. Rebellion is punished harshly with examples made of resistors to discourage others. Entire communities can be forcibly relocated if they prove troublesome, moved to different regions where they're surrounded by loyal Inca populations and can't organize resistance. But obedience is not the same as loyalty. They're waiting, watching for any sign of weakness, any crack in the facade of invincibility, any opportunity. And then there's the succession issue, the problem that everyone in Cusco knows about, but no one speaks of openly. Huayna Capac has many sons, as Sapa Incas typically do. Multiple wives, many children, a complex web of family relationships that all involve claims to power. But two sons stand out as particularly powerful, particularly dangerous to each other. Huascar, and Atahualpa. Huascar is based in Cusco, the traditional capital, the heart of the empire. He has the support of the old nobility, the families who have been part of the Inca elite for generations, who value tradition and legitimacy. In their eyes, Huascar is the rightful heir-son of the principal wife raised in the capital, trained in governance, connected to the established power structures. Atahualpa is based in Quito, in the northern part of the empire, where conquest is recent and the military presence is strong. He's the son of Huayna Capac and a princess from a northern kingdom that was conquered, which gives him connections in that region that Huascar lacks. More importantly, he commands armies that are loyal to him personally, battle-hardened soldiers who have fought in the northern campaigns and see Atahualpa as their leader. He's his father's favorite, or so many believe, the son who accompanied Huayna Capac on military campaigns, who proved himself in battle, who understands warfare in ways the Cusco-raised Huascar does not. Both have support, both have armies, both have legitimate claims according to different interpretations of succession law, which isn't as clearly defined as it should be. Both believe they should be the next Sapa Inca. Huayna Capac is aging, and everyone knows what happens when he dies. There will be a fight, maybe a negotiated settlement if wisdom prevails, but probably a civil war. Maybe the empire will tear itself apart from within brother-killing brother province, choosing sides, the whole carefully constructed edifice of power collapsing into chaos. But not yet. For now, Huayna Capac is still alive, still in control, still holding everything together through sheer force of personality and divine authority. The tensions simmer, but don't boil over. The succession question remains theoretical. The empire stands strong, organized, efficient, apparently invincible, unaware that thousands of miles away across an ocean it doesn't know exists, death is already on its way, not in the form of armies or conquistadors, in the form of something much smaller, much more deadly, something invisible that travels on the breath and touch, that spreads exponentially, that kills without mercy and without even needing a human hand to guide it. The apocalypse has already left port. It's just taking time to arrive. Let me take you somewhere else for a moment. Across an ocean the Inca don't know exists an expanse of water so vast it takes months to cross. To a humid tavern in Panama where a man named Francisco Pizarro is drinking cheap wine that tastes like vinegar and dreaming of impossible things. Pizarro is 48 years old, which is old for his profession. He's a conquistador, which is a polite word for a professional invader, a man who makes his living through violence and the seizure of other people's land. He came to the Americas looking for gold and glory, and so far he's found modest amounts of both, but nothing spectacular, nothing that will make him rich or famous or remembered after he's dead. He can't read or write, which embarrasses him more than he'd ever admit. When documents need signing, he makes a mark like an illiterate peasant. He has no noble blood, which in Spain means everything. He's the illegitimate son of a Spanish colonel and a woman of low birth whose name isn't even reliably recorded. In Spain, he would have remained nobody invisible, condemned to obscurity by the circumstances of his birth. But here in the New World, a man can remake himself if he's willing to be ruthless enough, if he's willing to do things that would turn the stomach of anyone with a conscience. Pizarro has proven himself willing. He's sitting with two partners at a rough wooden table, sticky with spilled wine. Diego de Almagro, a soldier with an ugly scar across his face from a sword fight years ago, and a personality to match brutal, effective, loyal in his way. And Hernando de Luque, a priest who handles the business side of their ventures and provides a thin veneer of religious justification for whatever violence they're planning. God's work, he calls it, converting the heathen, saving souls even if it requires breaking bodies. Across from them sits a thin, indigenous man who was captured during a coastal raid months ago. He's learned some Spanish enough to communicate, and he's been promising to tell them about something incredible in exchange for his freedom. "Tell me again," Pizarro says, leaning forward. His eyes are hard calculating. He's heard many stories from many indigenous captives, most of them exaggerations or outright lies, desperate attempts to say whatever might secure release. "There is a kingdom," the man says, in halting Spanish, each word carefully chosen. "In the mountains, very rich, gold in their temples, cities built of stone, roads better than anything in Spain. Everyone says that Almagro mutters taking a drink. Every captive tells us about a rich kingdom somewhere else. It's always somewhere else, always just beyond reach. This is different." The man insists, his voice taking on urgency. "I have seen their traders. They come to the coast with goods from the mountains. They have roads, real roads, not paths. Organized armies, structures. They're not scattered tribes. They're an empire." This catches Pizarro's attention. Structures, organization. That's not the usual fantasy talk about magical cities of gold and rivers flowing with silver. That sounds real. That sounds like something that might actually exist. How many people, he asks. The man shrugs helplessly. "Millions. The empire is vast, bigger than anything you've seen here." Pizarro and Almagro exchange looks across the table. Millions, with less than 200 men, which is all they could realistically recruit and fund for an expedition they're supposed to conquer an empire of millions. It's insane, it's suicide, it's exactly the kind of impossible gamble that makes legends. "We'll need more information," Luque says, practically always the businessman. "Maps, knowledge of their defenses, their military capabilities, their political structure. First, we need permission from the governor," Almagro adds. "Official sanction for the expedition, otherwise we're just pirates, and any gold we take can be confiscated by the crown." Pizarro nods slowly, but his mind is already elsewhere, already planning. An empire in the mountains. Gold in temples, he can see it. He can almost taste it. This is his chance, his last chance. He's not getting any younger. He's not getting any richer. He's been in the Americas for 20 years, chasing opportunity after opportunity, and he has almost nothing to show for it except scars and stories. This has to be it. What he doesn't know, what he can't possibly know, is that he's already won. The diseases his people carried with them on their ships, smallpox and measles and typhus and influenza, all the plagues that European populations had been exposed to for millennia, those diseases have already reached the Inca Empire. They traveled along indigenous trade networks faster than any Spanish expedition could march, spreading from coastal contact points inland, from village to village, from person to person, killing faster than any army, killing more efficiently than any weapon. The biological conquest has already begun, invisible and unstoppable. Pizarro just doesn't know it yet. He's planning a military campaign against an empire that's already dying. The first reports start reaching Cari in 1524, 6 years after he first noticed the numbers declining. Chaski runners arrive from northern provinces, breathing hard, carrying quipus with disturbing information. Strange sickness, the knots say, people covered in sores that erupt all over their bodies. Fever that burns so hot the sick feel like they're on fire from the inside. Deaths coming fast, too fast to properly honor the dead with traditional rites, too fast to even keep count. Entire villages dying, not everyone, not even most people in the early stages, but enough. Enough to be terrifying, enough to be completely outside the normal pattern of disease and death that Kari has been tracking his entire career. Kari receives the reports, updates his quipus, with fingers that tremble slightly sends the information up the chain of command. This is his job. Record, transmit, make sure the empire knows what's happening in its provinces. But knowing and understanding are different things. No one understands what this is. The Inca have diseases, of course. People get sick. People die. There are illnesses that cause fever illnesses, that cause sores illnesses that kill children or the elderly. But this is different. This kills differently. This spreads differently. It doesn't care if you're young or old, strong or weak. And it kills chiefs and farmers with equal efficiency, kills priests and children. It kills the Sapper Inca's own representatives sent to investigate what's happening. And it moves. Following the same roads that connect the empire, it travels from village to village, from tambo to tambo. The very efficiency that made the empire strong now makes it vulnerable. Roads that move goods and people also move disease. Rest houses that shelter travelers become perfect incubation chambers, enclosed spaces where sick and healthy sleep side by side, sharing air and water and food. Market towns where people from different regions come together to trade become perfect spreading grounds, mixing populations and sending them home to their villages, carrying invisible death. Remember Mama Koya, the merchant woman we met at the Tambo, the one who carried shells from the coast and mentioned that villages seemed quieter than she remembered. She's in a market town called Huanuco Pampa, now a major trading hub where coastal and highland goods are exchanged. The town is built around a massive central plaza surrounded by storehouses and administrative buildings. On market days, hundreds of people gather here, creating exactly the kind of crowded conditions where disease spreads most easily. She's laid out her shells on a woven mat, arranging them to catch the afternoon light. They glow with iridescent beauty blues and greens and purples that shift as you move. People stop to admire them, to touch them with curious fingers, to haggle over prices. She makes several good trades, exchanging shells for woven textiles and dried meat and small ornaments of bronze. Life is good. Business is good. 3 days later, she wakes with a headache. She thinks it's just fatigue from traveling. She's been on the road for weeks, walking long distances every day, sleeping in different tambos. Of course she's tired. Of course her head aches. By evening she has a fever. Her skin feels too hot, like she's standing too close to a fire. She drinks water but can't seem to quench her thirst. By the next morning the first sores appear on her arms. Small red spots that itch terribly. By afternoon they've spread to her face, her chest, her legs. By evening they're erupting into pustules filled with fluid. She's delirious with fever, now crying out for water for her mother who died years ago, for gods she's not even sure she believes in. 5 days after that first headache, she's dead. But before she died, she touched perhaps 30 people in the market, handed them shells, accepted their trade goods, shared food, shared water, shared the air in the crowded market plaza, smiled at a child and ruffled his hair, helped an elderly woman carry a heavy basket. Each of those 30 people goes home to their own villages, to their own families. Each one carries the disease with them, invisible, incubating, not showing symptoms yet, but already infectious. The spread is exponential. One person infects 5. Each of those 5 infects 5 more. Each of those 25 infects 5 more. Within a month, entire regions are experiencing outbreaks. Within 3 months, the disease has spread across half the empire, and the Inca have no defense, no understanding of contagion, no concept of quarantine. They bring their sick into their homes to care for them, which is the compassionate thing to do, the right thing to do, but it means entire families get infected, caregivers die with patients, the healers try everything, medicinal plants, ritual purifications, offerings to the gods. Nothing works. The disease doesn't care about their medicine. It just kills and kills and kills. And meanwhile, you're still running Kusik. You carry messages about the disease Quipus, asking for healers, for help, for any information about how to stop this. You run them from tambo to tambo, hand them to other runners, receive new Quipus coming from the opposite direction. The questions multiply, the reports grow more desperate, the numbers of dead climb higher. The network is working exactly as designed. Information flows at incredible speed, messages racing from province to province faster than a horse can gallop. But the disease moves faster. It doesn't need roads. It doesn't need rest stops. Moves from person to person, breath to breath, touch to touch, carried by the very social connections that make human life possible. One day, you arrive at a tambo station halfway through your assigned route and find it closed. Doors shut, no smoke from the fire pit, no runner waiting to receive your Quipu. This has never happened before. The chaski network never stops. It's the bloodstream of the empire. It doesn't close. You pound on the door, your heart starting to race. Hello, is anyone there? No answer. You push the door open carefully, covering your nose and mouth with your sleeve because you can already smell it. That smell. Inside 2 bodies. Chaski runners dead for days based on the smell and the state of decay. Their faces are covered in pustules, even in death. Their bodies are already bloating in the mountain heat. You back out your heart, hammering terror, flooding your body. You should perform funeral rites. You should honor the dead according to tradition. But you're terrified, and you run. You run to the next station, also closed. Door barred from the outside, which means someone locked it deliberately to prevent people from entering. The next station, empty, the chaski is gone, fled maybe, or dead somewhere else. Finally, you reach a functioning tambo and you ask the runner there, a woman named Quilla, the same name as your daughter, which makes your heart ache, about what's happening. Her face tells you everything before she speaks. She's lost weight. Her eyes are shadowed with exhaustion and fear. She looks like she hasn't slept in days. The sickness, she says, her voice flat. It's reached the highlands. 3 villages near here are almost gone. Just gone. Empty houses, Bodies they can't bury fast enough. They're burning them in piles. My village, you ask your voice, barely a whisper. Your home is 2 days' run from here. 2 days of pushing yourself to the absolute limit. She looks away, which is answer enough. I don't know specifically. Communications are breaking down. Too many chaski stations closing, too many runners dead or fled. The network is failing. You make a decision that breaks protocol, that violates every rule of your duty as a chaski. You leave your Quipu with her, just hand it over, abandoning your post, and you run, not your assigned route, not your designated relay. You run toward home, toward sumac and killer, toward everything that matters. You run faster than you've ever run in your life. Your lungs screaming for air that the altitude can't provide, your legs burning with exhaustion, not stopping for rest or water or food. You run through the night, the stars wheeling overhead, your shadow stretching long in the moonlight. Through the dawn, the sun rising behind you and painting the mountains gold. Through the next day, your vision narrowing to just the road ahead, just the next step, and the next. You reach your village as the sun is setting on the second day. The smell reaches you first, even before you can see the village. Smoke. But not the normal cooking smoke of daily life, not the comforting smell of home. The smoke of burning bodies. There aren't enough people left alive and healthy to bury the dead properly, to perform the rites that would send souls properly to the afterlife, so they're burning them. Pyres outside the village, flames reaching toward the darkening sky, black smoke rising in columns that can probably be seen for miles. You find your house. The door is open, which it never is. Sumac is careful about keeping the door closed to keep warmth in and animals out. You find her inside, alive. She's weak, covered in sores, fever, bright eyes that don't quite focus when they look at you. But alive, still breathing, still conscious enough to recognize you. Your daughter, Killer, is not alive. She's wrapped in a blanket laid out carefully on her sleeping mat. Her small body looks even smaller, wrapped up like that. Her face is covered in pustules, even in death. But Sumac has washed her as well as she could, arranged her hair the way Killer liked it, tried to give her some dignity in death since she couldn't give her life. You kneel beside your daughter's body and you don't cry. The Inca value control, stoicism, strength in the face of suffering. Crying is weakness. Emotion is something to be controlled, not displayed. But you pick her up, this small body that used to run to greet you when you came home from chaski duty, that used to demand stories and ask endless questions and fill the house with laughter. You hold her against your chest and she's cold. She's been dead for 2 days, Sumac will tell you later. 2 days of her mother sitting beside her body, too weak to move, too sick to bury her, just sitting and grieving alone. She's cold and stiff and gone, and you hold her anyway, Sumac, from her mat, her voice barely a whisper. The gods are angry. What did we do to deserve this? What sin did we commit that the gods would send this plague? You have no answer. You're holding your dead daughter and you have no answer. This is the reality of epidemic disease in a population with no immunity, no previous exposure, no biological defense. It's not a battle you can fight with weapons or courage. It's not an enemy you can see or challenge. It's death that comes on the breath, on the touch, invisible and unstoppable. And it's just beginning. The disease reaches Cusco in 1527, 3 years after the first reported outbreaks in the north. For a while, the capital seemed protected, insulated by distance and elevation, and perhaps by divine favor. The Sapa Inca is the son of the sun, after all. Surely the sun god will protect his holy city. But the disease doesn't care about divine favor. It doesn't distinguish between sacred and profane, between god-kings and peasants. Even the Sapa Inca, even the divine son of the sun himself, is not immune. Huayna Capac is in Quito when he contracts smallpox, overseeing military campaigns in the north, consolidating recent conquests, doing what Sapa Incas do, extending the empire, enforcing authority, making his presence felt in distant provinces. He's heard the reports about the disease, of course. Quipus have been arriving for months with increasingly alarming numbers, but the reports are from distant provinces, and there are always problems in distant provinces. That's why you have administrators. That's why you have a hierarchy to handle problems so they don't require divine intervention. Then people in his own camp start getting sick. First a servant, then a soldier, then one of his advisors, then Huayna Capac himself wakes with a fever. The Inca have skilled doctors-healers who know about medicinal plants and surgical techniques and treatments that actually work for many ailments. They can set bones with precision, they can stitch wounds, they can perform trepanation, drilling holes in skulls, to relieve pressure with success rates that are remarkably high. They understand the body in ways that are sophisticated and practical, but they have nothing for this. No medicinal plant helps, no ritual purification works, no offering to the gods produces healing. Huayna Capac burns with fever. Sores erupt across his body, covering his divine skin with pustules that weep fluid and blood. He who has never shown weakness, who has led armies and conquered kingdoms, who has executed enemies with his own hands, lies helpless on a mat while his body betrays him. His advisors try everything. They bring the best healers. They perform the most elaborate rituals. They make offerings of gold and silver and the finest textiles. They sacrifice llamas by the dozen. Nothing works. The son of the sun is dying, and the sun does nothing to save him. For 5 days he suffers. Fever and pain and the humiliation of being unable to control his own body, of being reduced to a suffering animal despite his divine status. On the 5th day, he dies, not peacefully, screaming in pain and fear, and perhaps in the beginning of doubt about everything he thought he knew about gods and divinity and cosmic order. The son of the sun killed by pustules. What does this mean? How do you interpret this? The entire Inca worldview is built on the premise that the Sapa Inca is divine, that he's protected by the sun god, that his authority comes from heaven itself. If the sun god couldn't protect his own divine representative from a disease, what does that say about the god's power? What does it say about the empire's divine favor? What does it say about everything the Inca believe? It's not just a political crisis when the Sapa Inca dies unexpectedly. It's a religious crisis, a philosophical crisis, a crisis of meaning itself. And Huayna Capac didn't clearly name an heir. He was supposed to have more time. He was supposed to have years to manage the succession, to clearly designate who would follow him to ensure a smooth transition of power. Instead, he died screaming of plague, leaving ambiguity. Huascar in Cusco claims the throne. He's the son of the principal wife, the Coya, which makes him the traditional heir, according to one interpretation of succession law. The old nobility supports him, the families who have been part of the Inca elite for generations, who value tradition and legitimacy and proper procedure. Atahualpa in Quito also claims the throne. He's the son, Huayna Capac, favored, or so his supporters claim. He accompanied his father on military campaigns. He proved himself in battle. He has the loyalty of battle-hardened armies in the north. He has military strength even if he lacks traditional legitimacy. Two claimants, two power bases, two visions of who should rule. The empire, already devastated by disease, now tears itself apart in civil war. Brother fights brother. Inca kills Inca. Armies that should be defending the empire's borders turn on each other instead. Provinces choose sides based on old rivalries and strategic calculations. The whole carefully constructed edifice of imperial power fractures along lines of loyalty and ambition. The battles are brutal. Tens of thousands die, adding to the death toll from disease. Entire regions are devastated first by plague, then by war, then by famine, because the war disrupts food production and distribution. The tambos are looted, the roads become battlefields, the chaski network fragments as runners flee or die, or simply stop showing up for duty because the empire that employed them is destroying itself. Atahualpa eventually wins, his armies stronger, his generals more skilled, his tactical situation better. In 1532, after years of bitter fighting, he captures Huascar and has him imprisoned. Atahualpa is now the Sapa Inca. Technically, officially, he's won the civil war, but the empire he's won is a shadow of what it was. Perhaps half the population is dead from disease. Some estimates put it higher. The civil war has destroyed infrastructure, emptied food stores, created chaos in provinces that were previously well-governed and stable. The roads still stand, those perfectly fitted stones still in place. The tambos are still there, though many are empty or damaged. The structure is still theoretically functional, but it's a body with half its blood drained away trying to keep walking. It's an empire that's hollow, gutted from within by plague and civil war. And the Spanish haven't even arrived yet. When they do arrive, when Pizarro finally makes his expedition to this empire, he's heard rumors about he's going to find a wounded giant. Still dangerous, still capable of crushing him and his tiny force if it can mobilize its remaining strength, but vulnerable in ways that a healthy empire would never be. Weakened by disease it couldn't fight, divided by civil war it couldn't prevent. The disease was their vanguard, their invisible army. It did 90% of the work of conquest before a single Spanish soldier set foot in the highlands. This is how civilizations fall, not always through dramatic invasions and heroic last stands, sometimes through invisible things that we don't prepare for, don't see coming, can't fight once they arrive. Smallpox killed more Inca than all the Spanish swords and guns combined, and no one meant for it to happen. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even understood by the Spanish who brought it. It was just biology doing what biology does when populations that have been separated for 15,000 years suddenly come into contact. when immune systems that have never encountered certain pathogens suddenly face them, when the diseases of one continent meet the people of another. The apocalypse doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives invisible, carried on a breath, shared in an embrace, spread by the very human connections that make us human. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. In 1532, Francisco Pizarro lands on the northern coast of Peru with 168 men. 168, let that number sink in for a moment. 168 men sailing into an empire that, even devastated by disease and civil war, still has a population in the millions. Atahualpa commands armies of tens of thousands of soldiers, men who have been fighting in a brutal civil war and are battle-hardened and experienced. The math should make this impossible. The Spanish should be swallowed whole, destroyed in a single battle, their bones left to bleach in the Andean sun. But Pizarro has advantages that simple math can't easily capture. He has steel swords and armor. The Inca have bronze weapons, softer, less effective. In hand-to-hand combat, steel cuts through bronze like bronze cuts through cloth. A Spanish sword can shear through an Inca weapon and keep going into the flesh behind it. He has horses. The Inca have never seen horses. There are no large, domesticated animals in the Americas that can be ridden. The largest animal the Inca know is the llama, which weighs maybe 300 pounds and can't carry a human rider. Horses weigh over 1,000 pounds and can carry an armored man at charging speed. To Inca soldiers who have never encountered them, these creatures seem like monsters or gods, or some terrifying combination of both. A charging cavalry creates panic that goes beyond rational assessment of military threat. He has guns and cannons, primitive by modern standards, slow to reload, inaccurate beyond close range, prone to misfiring. But the noise they make, the smoke, the sheer, terrifying spectacle of them, these create psychological effects that matter more than their actual killing power. And most importantly, crucially, he has indigenous allies. Groups that were conquered by the Inca and resent them. Groups that see the Spanish as potential liberators, or at least as useful allies against a hated enemy. These allies provide knowledge supplies, additional soldiers, legitimacy. But even with these advantages, Pizarro knows he's outnumbered in absurd proportions. His only hope is audacity. Boldness, so extreme it seems like insanity. The kind of gamble that either makes you legendary or gets you killed with no middle ground. The coastal villages the Spanish pass through as they march inland are half empty, which is the first sign that something is wrong from the Inca perspective, but right from the Spanish perspective. Disease has already done its work here years before any Spanish soldier arrived. They find houses with no occupants, doors hanging open. Gold objects lying untouched in empty homes because there's no one left to use them, to value them, to care about them. Pizarro sees this and realizes something crucial. This empire is wounded. The timing is perfect, better than he could have hoped. One of their indigenous guides is a young man named Willak, which means narrator or storyteller. He's maybe 25 years old, his face scarred from smallpox, his body thin in the way of someone who survived disease but lost everything else. His parents died. His siblings died. His wife, married just 2 years before the sickness came, died screaming in fever while he held her hand and begged gods who didn't answer. He has nothing left, no family, no community, no loyalty to an empire that organized life but couldn't save anyone when death came on pustules and fever. Pizarro hires him as a translator and guide. Willac speaks some Spanish learned from coastal traders who came through his village years ago before the disease. His Spanish is broken, imperfect, but functional enough. Willac agrees to help the Spanish. What else is he going to do? Where else can he go? Everyone he loved is dead. The empire continued functioning while his world burned, didn't stop, didn't mourn, just kept demanding tribute and labor and obedience, even as people died by the thousands. His betrayal, if you want to call it that, is born from grief and rage, and the kind of emptiness that comes from losing everyone you love in the space of a few weeks. It's not about gold, it's not about power. It's about a young man who watched his world end and decided that he owed the empire nothing. The Spanish follow the Inca roads inland, marching from the coast toward the mountains. These roads amaze them. Spanish conquistadors, men who have seen Roman ruins in their homeland, men who thought they understood engineering and organization, walk on Inca roads and struggle to find adequate words to describe them. One soldier, Pedro Pizarro, a cousin of Francisco, will later write in a letter home, "These roads would shame the finest work in Spain. They climb mountains that no Christian road would attempt. Every stone is placed with such care that the work seems impossible, as if done by magic rather than human hands. They are maintained to a standard that makes our best highways look like cattle paths. The irony is perfect and terrible. The roads built to hold the empire together now serve the empire's enemies. The same efficiency that allowed messages to travel at impossible speeds now allows an invading army to march with minimal difficulty. The same tambos that sheltered Inca runners now shelter Spanish soldiers. Cusick sees them coming. He survived the disease, both he and Sumac did, though it left them scarred and partially blind and forever marked. His daughter didn't survive, and that's a wound that will never heal, but he's still alive, still functional. He's no longer fast enough to be a chaski, his body broken by grief and illness and age. Instead, he works maintaining a section of road in the highlands using the skills that Yachak once taught to his son Tupac before Tupac died in a guano mine collapse. He's repairing a drainage channel, his scarred hands moving over stones with the automatic precision of long practice when he looks up and sees something impossible moving up the road toward him. Creatures, half man, half beast, shining in the sun like they're made of light itself. It takes him several seconds to understand that these are men riding on animals. The animals are huge, bigger than llamas, bigger than any creature he's ever seen. They move with a power that's frightening, even from a distance, their hooves striking the stone road with sharp cracks that echo off the mountains. The men riding them wear metal that covers their entire body's armor that reflects the sun so brightly it hurts to look at directly. They carry long metal weapons that catch the light. Behind them, more men on foot, also covered in metal, moving in an organized column that speaks of military discipline. Cusick stands frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process what he's seeing. Then, survival instinct kicks in. He drops his tools and runs. He runs to the nearest official, a local curaca named Urk, and tries to explain what he saw. Strange men, he gasps out of breath, riding on beasts, huge beasts, covered in metal that reflects the sun like water. Urk frowns, his expression skeptical. Metal like bronze, number different, brighter, harder looking, and the beasts I've never seen anything like them, as big as 6 llamas. "Are you sure you didn't drink too much, Chicha?" Urk asks, but there's uncertainty in his voice now because Kusik is not known for drinking or lying. The report is sent via chaski to Atahualpa, who is in Cajamarca celebrating his victory in the Civil War with an army of 80,000 soldiers. The message travels fast runners moving at maximum speed, passing the Quipu from hand to hand. It reaches Atahualpa within 2 days, which is remarkably fast for the distance. Atahualpa hears the reports of strange men riding strange beasts and makes a decision that will change everything. He invites them to Cajamarca. His advisors debate this decision. Some say these foreigners should be killed immediately before they can cause trouble. Don't take chances, don't allow unknown variables, eliminate the threat while it's still small. But Atahualpa has just won a civil war. He commands 80,000 battle-tested soldiers. These strangers number less than 200 according to the reports. What possible danger could they pose? He's curious. Who are these people? Where do they come from? What do they want? Are they gods? Are they demons? Are they just strange men from some distant land? Only one way to find out. Invite them, meet them, see what they're about. If they prove troublesome, they can be dealt with easily enough. 80,000 soldiers can certainly handle less than 200 strangers, no matter how strange their appearance. It's a reasonable calculation based on the information available. It's also a fatal mistake. November the 16th, 1532, Francisco Pizarro enters the city of Cajamarca with his 168 men. It's a planned city organized around a central square surrounded by long, low buildings. The architecture is typical Inca stone walls fitted perfectly, thatched roofs, functional and efficient. The square is large enough to hold thousands of people, surrounded on all sides by structures that create a natural enclosure. It's perfect for what Pizarro has in mind. He hides his men in buildings around the square, cavalry on one side, infantry on the other, cannons positioned at key points where they can fire into the square. The buildings have multiple entrances, allowing quick deployment when the time comes. Then he sends word to Atahualpa, "I wish to meet you. Come to the square." Atahualpa agrees. Why wouldn't he? He's the Sapper Inca, the divine son of the sun, the ruler of the largest empire in the Americas. He fears nothing. His army surrounds the city. He's protected by thousands of soldiers. He enters the square carried on a golden litter by 80 nobles, all of them wearing their finest textiles, their most elaborate jewelry, their most impressive headdresses. Atahualpa himself is dressed to display absolute power, gold glinting on his arms and chest, his headdress an artwork of feathers and precious metals that catches the afternoon sun. His bearing is regal, confident, the posture of someone who has never had reason to fear anyone. He's radiating power. He's at the peak of his authority. He just won a civil war. He's the undisputed ruler of an empire. Behind him, his army waits outside the city. 80,000 soldiers organized and ready. But they're not in the square because this is a diplomatic meeting, not a battle. The Inca don't bring weapons to diplomatic meetings. It's against protocol. It would be insulting to your host. A Spanish priest, Vicente de Valverde, approaches Atahualpa through the crowd of nobles. He's carrying a Bible and a crucifix, looking nervous but determined. Through Willak's translation, and imagine how difficult this translation must be, how many concepts simply don't translate. The priest reads the requerimiento, a Spanish legal document that's essentially a demand for submission. The document says, more or less, submit to our king and our God, accept Christianity, or we have the legal right to conquer you and take your land. This is Spanish law, Spanish logic, Spanish assumptions about how the world works. Imagine translating this. How do you explain the concept of the Spanish king to someone who has never heard of Spain, who thinks his empire is the entire civilized world? How do you explain the Christian God to someone whose entire worldview revolves around the sun and a pantheon of nature deities? Willac does his best, but the translation is garbled, incomplete, probably incomprehensible. Atahualpa is confused and insulted. Through Willac he responds, I am subject to no man, the sun is my father. I bow to no foreign god whose authority I don't recognize. The priest, frustrated by this response, hands him a Bible, thinking perhaps that the physical object will somehow communicate what words cannot. Atahualpa examines this strange object. He's never seen a book. The Inca don't have writing as the Spanish understand it. They have quipus, but those are three-dimensional objects that you read with your fingers, not your eyes. He holds the Bible to his ear, as if it might speak the way a Quipu reads knots. As if this object, which seems important to these strangers, might communicate its importance audibly. It says nothing. Frustrated, confused, insulted by this whole strange interaction, he throws it to the ground. It lands in the dust, its pages splaying open. The priest shouts, Santiago, attack, avenge this insult to God, and Pizarro's men surge out of their hiding places in the buildings. Cavalry charges into the square, horses thundering across stone, the sound amplified by the enclosed space. Steel swords flash in the afternoon sun. Cannons fire into the packed crowd of nobles and attendants, the sound so loud and unexpected that many Inca freeze in shock, unable to process what's happening. Infantry pushes forward in organized formation, their steel swords cutting through cloth armor and unarmored flesh with terrible efficiency. The Inca nobles in the square are unarmed. This was supposed to be a meeting, a diplomatic encounter, a conversation between leaders. They have no weapons, no armor, no way to defend themselves except their own bodies. They panic. They try to flee, running in every direction, looking for escape. But the square is surrounded by buildings, and the Spanish control the exits. There's nowhere to go. The Inca soldiers outside hear the commotion, the screams, the cannons, the sounds of slaughter, and try to push into the square to help their sapper Inca. But they're trapped by the thousands of people trying to flee in the opposite direction. It's chaos, confusion, bodies pressing against bodies. No one can move effectively. No one can organize a counterattack. The massacre continues for hours. 7,000 Inca die in the square, crushed, trampled, or cut down by Spanish steel. 0 Spanish deaths. A few injuries, mostly from being thrown from horses or struck by debris, but not a single fatality. Atahualpa is captured alive, pulled from his litter by Spanish hands that dare to touch the divine, thrown to the ground like a common criminal, chained like an animal. The son of the sun in chains. Cusick is in the square. He came to Cajamarca to see the sapper Inca, to witness history, to be part of the celebration of the Civil War's end. Instead, he witnesses catastrophe. He survives by hiding under a pile of bodies, lying perfectly still among the dead, covered in blood that mostly isn't his own. Through a small gap between corpses, he watches Atahualpa dragged away in chains, watches the divine son of the sun treated like livestock. The God King. the center of the Inca universe, chained like an animal by foreign men who don't even recognize his divinity. Something breaks in Cusick in that moment, some fundamental belief in the order of things, in the structure of reality, in the way the world is supposed to work. If the Sapa Inca can be chained, if the gods can allow this, then what is real? What can be trusted? What does anything mean? He lies there among the dead until nightfall, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. When darkness finally comes, he crawls out from under the bodies and walks away. He doesn't know where he's going. Just away. Away from the square, away from the Spanish, away from the divine son of the sun, chained like a llama. Away from everything he thought he knew about how the world works. Atahualpa is imprisoned in a room in Cajamarca, chained and guarded, but otherwise treated reasonably well. He's confused, he's outraged. He's the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler of millions. This shouldn't be possible. The universe shouldn't allow this. But he's also practical. He understands power, even if this particular form of it is foreign to him. These strange men want something. Everything can be negotiated. Everything has a price. He makes Pizarro an offer. I will fill this room with gold if you release me. The room is 22 feet long, 17 feet wide. Atahualpa draws a line on the wall with his hand, reaching as high as he can. 8 feet high, roughly. Fill the room to that line with gold, all the gold you want. In exchange, release me and leave our lands. Pizarro, hardly believing his luck, agrees. He can barely contain his excitement. A room full of gold. This is beyond his wildest dreams. This is the kind of wealth that makes legends, that ensures your name is remembered for centuries. Word goes out across the empire through what remains of the chaski network. Bring gold to Cajamarca. Strip it from temples if you must. Melt down artworks, empty treasuries. The Sapa Inca must be ransomed. And the gold comes. Hari, the Quipu Mayok, who spent years tracking numbers and warning about population declines, now oversees collections in his province. He updates his quipus obsessively, tracking every piece of gold that's taken, every object that's melted down, every artifact that's lost forever. His fingers move over the knots with mechanical precision, but his heart isn't in it. What's the point? The numbers couldn't save them from disease. The organization couldn't save them from civil war. The gods couldn't save the Sapa Inca from chains. What's the point of any of it? But he does his duty, records everything, makes sure the gold flows to Cajamarca as ordered. In Cusco, soldiers strip the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, the holiest site in the empire. They take the gold sheets from the walls, prying them off carefully and rolling them up. They take the garden, every golden corn plant, every golden llama, every precious artifact that took years to create. Everything is tossed into carts to be carried to Cajamarca, where it will be melted down into bars and divided among the Spanish. A young boy named Waman, 10 years old, watches soldiers take a golden llama from his local temple. It's a smaller piece, not as grand as the ones in Cusco, but beautiful, intricate. His father was a priest, a metal worker who spent 20 years crafting that llama with his own hands. Each hair individually made each detail perfect, each curve studied from living llamas until the proportions were exactly right. His father died of smallpox 2 years ago. The llama was his life's work, his legacy, the thing he was proudest of. The soldiers toss it in a cart with other treasures, treating it like scrap metal, just gold to be melted, just weight to measure and divide. To Waman, it's the last piece of his father being carried away. The last tangible proof that his father existed. Created beauty mattered. He doesn't cry. He's 10 years old, and Inca boys don't cry. But he watches the cart disappear down the road, taking his father's legacy to be destroyed. The room fills with gold. It takes months, llama trains arriving from across the empire, carrying gold from hundreds of sources. Over the course of several months, enough gold is brought to meet Atahualpa's promise. Estimates vary wildly. The Spanish weren't great at record-keeping in the chaos, but it's somewhere between 13,000 and 24,000 pounds of gold. 13,000 pounds at minimum. That's over 6 tons of precious metal. The wealth of an empire reduced to portable form. The ransom is paid. Pizarro promised to release Atahualpa. A deal was made. An agreement reached, but he doesn't release him. Instead, the Spanish put Atahualpa on trial. The charges are absurd, clearly fabricated, plotting rebellion against the Spanish crown. He's a prisoner. How could he plot anything practicing polygamy, which is normal for Inca nobility, worshipping false gods, which is his religion, murdering his brother Huascar, which is true, but that's internal Inca politics, not Spanish jurisdiction. The trial is theatre, the verdict is predetermined, guilty, sentence death. They give Atahualpa a final choice, one last negotiation. Burn at the stake as a pagan and your body will be destroyed, unable to enter the afterlife according to Inca belief. Or convert to Christianity, accept baptism, and will garrote you instead, preserving your body. Atahualpa, even in the face of death, thinks about the afterlife, about what comes next, about preserving some possibility of continued existence beyond this world. He converts, takes the Christian name Francisco after Pizarro, his captor and executioner. On July 26, 1533, in the same square where 7,000 Inca were slaughtered less than a year ago, Atahualpa is garroted to death. A metal collar is placed around his neck and slowly tightened by turning a screw, strangling him gradually while he's seated upright. It takes several minutes. He dies slowly, publicly. His divine status irrelevant. His ransom paid but meaningless. The divine son of the sun executed by foreigners who don't even believe he's divine. The empire dies in that moment, not officially. There will be puppet emperors, resistance movements, a last Inca state that survives for decades, but the heart dies here. When Atahualpa dies and the sun fails to intervene, when the gods allow their divine representative to be strangled in public, something fundamental breaks in the Inca worldview. What does it mean to be Inca after this? What does divine authority mean when gods allow this to happen? What does the empire stand for when its god-king can be chained, ransomed, and executed while the sun shines down and does nothing? These questions will haunt survivors for generations. The conquest is complete, even though it will take decades more for the Spanish to fully control the territory. The moment of death is the moment the empire's soul departs. Pizarro is too smart to declare himself king of the Inca Empire. He understands that he needs legitimacy, or at least the appearance of it, to rule effectively. Naked foreign conquest tends to inspire rebellion. Better to rule through local structures, through familiar faces. So he installs a puppet Sapa Inca, someone from the royal family who will do what he's told and provide a veneer of continuity. First is Tupac Atahualpa's brother. He's crowned with appropriate ceremony, given the title and regalia, told he's now the ruler. He dies mysteriously 3 months later, probably poisoned by Atahualpa's remaining supporters, though no one can prove it. Or maybe he died of disease or despair. Death is everywhere now. Then comes Manco Inca Yupanqui, another son of Huayna Capac, another brother in this family of brothers who keep killing each other or being killed. Manco initially cooperates with the Spanish. He sees them as potential allies against Atahualpa's faction, which killed several of his brothers during the Civil War. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, the logic goes. He helps the Spanish take Cusco, thinking he's using them to reclaim power, to restore legitimate authority. He realizes too late that he's a puppet, a convenient face on Spanish rule. The Spanish loot Cusco, thoroughly taking whatever gold and silver remained after the ransom. They rape women, including Manco's own wife, treating her like property despite her royal status. They enslave people, forcing them to work in mines and fields under brutal conditions. They treat the Inca like conquered subjects, which they are, but Manco thought he would be different. He thought his cooperation would earn respect, protection, some measure of autonomous authority. He was wrong. In 1536, Manco escapes to the mountains, humiliated and enraged. He gathers supporters, soldiers who remained loyal to him, people who resent Spanish rule, those who remember what the empire was before the conquest. He organizes a rebellion, a desperate attempt to reclaim what was lost. He gathers perhaps 100,000 Inca warriors and besieges Cusco. The city is surrounded, cut off, the Spanish trapped inside, with maybe 200 soldiers. For months the siege continues. The Inca attack again and again, trying to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. They almost win. But the Spanish have horses which can charge through infantry formations and create havoc. They have steel which cuts through Inca weapons and armor. They have a kind of desperate ferocity that comes from knowing you're trapped with no hope of retreat or reinforcement, knowing that surrender means death. Spanish cavalry breaks Inca formations again and again. The Inca, fighting with bronze weapons and traditional tactics designed for fighting other Inca armies, can't adapt fast enough to this new kind of warfare. Eventually the siege fails. Manco retreats to the fortress of Ollantaytambo, a stronghold built into a mountainside. When the Spanish pursue him there, he retreats deeper into the mountains to Vilcabamba, a hidden city in the jungle-covered eastern slopes where the Spanish can't easily reach. Vilcabamba becomes the last independent Inca state, a remnant of the empire clinging to existence in terrain too difficult for Spanish horses and too disease-ridden for Spanish soldiers who aren't adapted to tropical conditions. It survives until 1572, 40 years after the conquest began. 40 years of independence in isolation, cut off from the wider world, shrinking gradually as disease and pressure from the Spanish-controlled territories take their toll. The final Sapa Inca is Tupac Amaru, a young man barely more than a teenager who inherited a kingdom that's barely more than a single city and the surrounding jungle. In 1572, Spanish forces finally find Vilcabamba. The location had been secret protected by geography and loyal supporters, but someone always talks eventually. Someone always betrays for the right price or under the right pressure. They capture Tupac Amaru and bring him back to Cusco in chains, just like Atahualpa 40 years earlier. They execute him in the central plaza in front of thousands of Inca who have gathered hoping for something, a miracle, divine intervention, a sign that the old gods still have power. Anything, nothing happens. Tupac Amaru dies, his head separated from his body by a Spanish sword, and the Inca Empire officially ends. No more puppet emperors, no more independent Inca states, no more resistance movements with legitimate royal leadership, just Spanish rule and the long grinding process of colonial administration. Let me give you numbers because numbers matter, and Kari taught us to respect what numbers tell us. Before first contact with Europeans, 10 to 12 million people in the Inca Empire. By 1600, less than 70 years later, 1 to 2 million people. That's an 80 to 90% mortality rate. Think about that. 9 out of 10 people gone. Entire generations wiped out. Villages emptied. Families ended. Most died from disease. Smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza and other plagues that swept through populations that had no immunity, no resistance, no biological defenses built up over generations of exposure. Wave after wave of epidemics, each one killing people who had survived the previous outbreak, each one finding new victims who thought perhaps they'd been spared. Some died in the fighting. The conquest wasn't quick or clean or limited to a few dramatic battles. It was decades of warfare resistance, brutal suppression, scorched earth campaigns and reprisal killings. And some died from what came after, from the colonial structure that replaced the empire. The Spanish impose a system called encomienda. Technically, it's not slavery. The indigenous people aren't owned as property. They're being protected and Christianized by Spanish encomenderos who are granted rights to their labor in exchange for providing religious instruction and protection. In practice, it's slavery. Just with different paperwork, indigenous people are forced to work estates, mines, farms, whatever their encomendero demands. They have no choice, no pay worth mentioning, no rights they can effectively exercise. If they resist, they're punished brutally. If they run, they're hunted down and made into examples. The worst is the Potosi silver mine, a mountain of silver in what's now Bolivia. The Spanish exploit it with forced indigenous labor, working people to death in pursuit of precious metal that will fund Spain's wars and economy for centuries. Working conditions in Potosi are a death sentence. Dark tunnels that collapse regularly, burying workers alive. Toxic dust that fills lungs and kills slowly through respiratory disease. Altitude that makes breathing hard even before you're carrying heavy loads of ore through narrow passages. Chemical exposure from the mercury used to refine silver, causing tremors and madness and death. They say 8 million people died in Potosi over the colonial period. That number might be exaggerated, but even if it's half that or a quarter, it's still a mountain of human bones to match the mountain of silver. But it's not just physical destruction, not just death by disease and war and forced labor. The Spanish target culture itself. Priests burn Quipus, seeing them as pagan tools, devices of devil worship. All that information, all that history, all those carefully knotted records of population and tribute and stories and knowledge burned as if they're worthless string. Centuries of accumulated data and cultural knowledge destroyed in the name of Christianity. Temple gold is melted into bars, losing all artistic and cultural value to become just weight, just wealth in portable form. Sacred sites are destroyed and churches built on top, literally burying the old religion under the new. The Inca religion is banned. Worshipping Inti, the sun god, becomes illegal. punishable by death or imprisonment. Children are taken from families to be educated, which means indoctrinated. They're taught Spanish, taught Christianity, taught to be ashamed of their heritage, their language, their parents' beliefs. They're beaten for speaking Quechua, punished for practicing traditional customs, rewarded for becoming as Spanish as possible. And yet, despite all of this, despite genocide and forced labor and cultural destruction and determined efforts to erase everything that was Inca, things survive. Language survives. Quechua is still spoken by 10 million people today across South America. It didn't die. It adapted, absorbed some Spanish words. There's no Quechua word for horse or cow. So those are borrowed, but kept its core structure, its way of thinking about the world. Agricultural knowledge survives. The terracing techniques that allow farming on impossible slopes, the understanding of how to grow crops at different altitudes, the preservation of hundreds of potato varieties. This knowledge is passed down from generation to generation, farmer to child, hands-on demonstration that doesn't need writing to persist. Weaving traditions survive, patterns that encode stories and identity passed from grandmother to granddaughter, woman to woman, in spaces where men don't pay attention and Spanish authorities don't bother to look. These patterns tell stories about mountains and rivers and ancestors, keeping memory alive in textile form. Some Quipus survive hidden away by families who knew they were important even if they couldn't read them anymore after the Quipu Camayos died without passing on their specialized knowledge. These Quipus sit in houses wrapped, carefully protected, waiting for a time when someone might learn to read them again. And the roads survive. The Spanish use them. How could they not? They're the best roads in the Americas, better than anything Europe has outside of Italy's Roman remnants. But the Spanish don't maintain them as carefully. They don't have the organized labor network, the commitment to constant repair. Sections fall into disrepair, bridges collapse and aren't rebuilt. But the stones remain testament to engineering that was built to last centuries. Cusick survives into his 60s, which is impressive given everything he's lived through. Disease that killed his daughter and left him scarred. Conquest that destroyed everything he believed about divine order. Decades of colonial rule where he works fields that used to belong to his community but now belong to a Spanish landlord he's never met. He's not a chaski anymore. Those days are gone. The network collapsed. The empire that employed him long dead. He's just an old man with scars and a blind eye and memories of a time when things were different, when the roads carried runners and the tambos sheltered travelers and the empire functioned with precision. His granddaughter is named Cusi, which means joy, named after his daughter Killa, who died so many years ago that the sharp pain has become a dull ache, something he can live with instead of something that destroys him. Cusi is 7 years old. She asks him to teach her the old language, the Quechua, that they're supposed to speak only at home, never in public, where Spanish authorities or priests might hear and punish them for clinging to indigenous identity. He teaches her a song his grandmother taught him when he was young. Before the disease, before the conquest, before everything changed, it's about mountains that remember everything written in their stones, about roads that wait patiently for footsteps that will return someday, about people who endure through catastrophe because endurance is what people do. They can take the gold, he tells her, his voice rough with age and grief and a lifetime of breathing mountain air. They can take the empire, they can take the Sapa Inca and chain him like an animal, but they can't take the songs. Songs live in hearts, not temples, remember that. He dies holding her hand in a small house, in a village that's now controlled by people who don't speak his language or worship his gods or care about his stories. But Kusi remembers. She grows up and teaches her own children the songs, the language, the stories about when the empire stood and the roads carried runners at impossible speeds. The line continues, and now we're back where we started. I'm Rosa, standing on this road in present-day Peru, a descendant of Kusik's line 16 generations removed from the man who ran these roads as a chaski and lived to see them carry foreign armies instead. I carry his story in my blood, in the language I speak, in the songs my grandmother taught me, that her grandmother taught her all the way back through time, to Kusik teaching Kusi in a small house while colonial authorities tried to erase everything Inca. I'm a Quechua speaker, fluent and proud of it, using a language that colonizers tried to destroy and failed. I work as a guide for tourists who come to walk the Inca roads and marvel at the engineering, who take pictures and ask questions and don't always understand what they're walking on. I tell them, you're walking on more than just stones. You're walking on memory, on persistence, on the refusal of a people to disappear just because someone conquered them. The stones under my feet are still fitted perfectly after 500 years. You still can't slip a knife blade between them. Some sections have washed away, the Spanish didn't maintain them, and erosion is patient and relentless. Some sections are buried under jungle growth or covered by newer roads, but the bones of the empire remain visible and tangible and real. The Inca road network is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site called Cajamarca and the Great Inca Road. Archaeologists work with indigenous communities to preserve it, to understand it, to keep it from disappearing entirely under time and neglect and the jungle that wants to reclaim everything. And every year there's a ceremony I make sure to attend. At Quipu, the same bridge location that Kusik might have crossed in his lifetime, communities still gather to rebuild the suspension bridge using traditional techniques. This knowledge has been passed down unbroken for 500 years. Through conquest and colonialism and independence and modernization, through everything that should have destroyed it, this one ceremony persists. The communities gather on both sides of the gorge. They bring grass fibers that have been prepared according to traditional methods. The elder women, and there are always elder women who remember, who know, supervise the braiding of massive cables. The children watch and learn by doing just as they did when the empire stood. Hands-on knowledge that doesn't need writing, doesn't need institutions, just needs people willing to teach and children willing to learn. They cut the old bridge free, always a dramatic moment, watching this massive structure that has carried thousands of footsteps fall into the gorge, tumbling like a giant serpent returning to earth. Then they build the new one, throwing the first rope across the gorge, cheering when it connects both sides, braiding the cables, attaching the deck, testing it with weight before allowing people to cross. It takes 3 days. At the end, they have a bridge that will last another year, that will carry people and goods and llamas across a gorge that would otherwise be impassable for miles in either direction. It's the same bridge built the same way, serving the same purpose it did 5 centuries ago. This is survival, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that says the empire fell. But we remember how to build bridges, we remember our language, we remember our songs, we remember who we are. I sit on a stone that's been here for 500 years, in the same spot where Kusik might have sat when he was young, and the empire still stood, and he didn't know that everything was about to change. I eat chuño, the same freeze-dried potatoes he would have eaten, made the same way, trampled by bare feet during freezing nights and dried in thin mountain sun. And I think about conversations across time, about what Kusik would say if he could see us now. Grandfather, if you could see us, what would you think? We lost the empire. True, that vast structure of organization and power and divine authority gone, but we kept the language. 10 million of us still speak Quechua, still think in its patterns, still understand the world through its words. We lost the gold, melted down, shipped to Spain, scattered across Europe as coins and jewelry and church ornaments, but we kept the songs, the music that carries stories, that encodes memory, that passes from grandmother to granddaughter in an unbroken chain. We lost millions, an entire generation gone, families ended, knowledge lost, that can never be made right. But millions survived, and their descendants, we are still here, still fighting, still refusing to disappear. We lost the empire's structures, the Maite work, and the tambos and the organized flow of tribute and labor. But we kept the knowledge, how to farm these mountains, how to build bridges, how to survive at altitudes where air is thin, how to preserve food, how to weave stories into cloth. The Inca culture didn't die. It couldn't be killed, though they tried. Instead, it syncretized, blended, adapted. Modern Peru is mestizo, mixed, a fusion that contains both conqueror and conquered, both Spanish and indigenous, both new and old. We're not purely Inca. That would be impossible. Too much has changed. But we're not purely Spanish either. We're something new that carries something old within it. Indigenous movements still fight for land rights, for recognition, for justice, delayed but not forgotten. We still identify as descendants of the Inca, still carry that history forward, still demand that the world remember what was here before conquest. The truth of conquest is this: it's never complete. You can conquer land, you can kill kings, you can steal gold. You can burn books and ban religions and try to erase a culture, but you can't conquer the human spirit's stubborn refusal to forget. The insistence on teaching children in the language of their ancestors, even when it's forbidden. The determination to rebuild bridges year after year using techniques that are centuries old. The quiet acts of cultural preservation that say, we were here, we are here, we will continue to be here. Here's the paradox at the heart of the Inca story. Everything that made the empire great also made it vulnerable. Those efficient roads that connected distant provinces and moved information at impossible speeds, they became highways for disease and invasion, spreading death faster than any empire could respond. The centralized power structure, where all authority flowed from the Sapa Inca, where he was the divine center holding everything together, kill or capture the God King, and the entire empire convulses, paralyzed by questions of legitimacy and divine authority. The complex organization that managed millions of people across incredibly diverse ecosystems with precision and efficiency, it was fragile when disrupted, collapsing when key people died or key structures broke down, unable to adapt quickly to unprecedented challenges. This isn't unique to the Inca, it's a pattern that repeats across history. Our modern world has equally efficient networks. The internet connects billions of people spreading information at the speed of light. But it also spreads misinformation, enables cyber attacks, creates vulnerabilities that didn't exist when information moved slower and networks were more isolated. Global supply chains create prosperity by connecting producers and consumers across continents, optimizing every step of production and distribution. They also create fragility. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how quickly these efficient structures can break when disrupted, how dependent we've become on complex networks we don't fully understand. We build connected, interdependent structures because they're efficient, because they allow us to do more with less, because optimization creates wealth and power. But efficiency often comes at the cost of resilience. The more optimized a network becomes, the less slack it has, the less able it is to absorb unexpected shocks. The question we should be asking ourselves, what are we not seeing in our own networks? What invisible vulnerabilities are we creating in our drive for optimization and connection? What's the modern equivalent of roads that spread plague while trying to spread prosperity? Here's an uncomfortable truth. 90% of the conquest was biological, not military. Francisco Pizarro gets credit in history books for conquering the Inca Empire with 168 men. It's an incredible story of audacity and ruthlessness, and it's taught as an example of how superior technology and tactics can overcome numerical disadvantages. But that story is incomplete. The truth is, disease did most of the work before Pizarro ever landed on the coast. Smallpox killed more Inca than all the Spanish swords and guns combined. And it wasn't planned, it wasn't a strategy. The Spanish didn't weaponize disease, they just carried it unknowingly in their bodies and their breath. Europeans had been exposed to livestock diseases for thousands of years. Cowpox from dairy farming, measles from domesticated animals, influenza from pigs. These diseases jumped from animals to humans in the close quarters of agricultural societies, and over thousands of years, European populations developed some resistance. Not immunity, people still died from these diseases in Europe, but enough population-level resistance that mortality rates weren't catastrophic. The Americas had been isolated for 15,000 years, separated from Eurasia. Since the last ice age, the indigenous populations here had different diseases, different immune challenges, different biological preparations, but they had no exposure to the specific cocktail of plagues that Europeans carried. No resistance, no immunity, no biological defense built up over generations of surviving outbreaks. First contact meant biological apocalypse, and this pattern repeated across the entire Western Hemisphere. Wherever Europeans went, disease went first. Indigenous populations were devastated before they even encountered European soldiers. The death toll from disease was always higher than the death toll from warfare, often by orders of magnitude. This isn't a comfortable lesson, but it's an important one. The most catastrophic events are often not dramatic invasions or obvious military threats. They're invisible things we don't prepare for, because we don't see them coming, because they don't look like traditional dangers, because they move through mechanisms we don't understand. Climate change creeping forward, changing weather patterns and sea levels and agricultural zones gradually enough that we can ignore it year to year, but dramatically enough that it reshapes civilization over decades. Ecological collapse as interconnected networks break down in ways that aren't obvious until cascade failures make them impossible to ignore. Pandemics that spread exponentially before we understand what we're dealing with, before we've developed responses, before we've even confirmed what the disease is. The threats are often already in motion, already spreading, already doing damage before we notice them. By the time the Inca realized they were dealing with a plague, it had already killed millions and reached the Sapa Inca himself. The lesson is vigilance, preparation, taking invisible threats seriously before they become visible catastrophes. But that's hard because humans are bad at responding to slow-moving or invisible dangers. We're good at responding to lions and enemy armies and immediate threats. We're terrible at responding to threats that build gradually over time. The Inca had no way to prepare for smallpox because they didn't know it existed until it was killing them. We don't have that excuse. We know about climate change, about pandemic risks, about ecological collapse. The question is whether we'll act on that knowledge before it's too late. But here's what cannot be conquered, what empires and colonizers and historical catastrophes cannot destroy: the stubbornness of human culture. The Inca Empire fell. The political structure collapsed. The god-kings died. The gold was stolen, the temples were destroyed, the religion was banned, but the people remained. And people carry culture forward in ways that empires cannot. Language adapts and survives. Quechua is still spoken by 10 million people today across Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and parts of Colombia and Argentina. It absorbed Spanish influence. Yes, there are loan words for things that didn't exist in the pre-contact world. But the core structure survived the way of thinking about the world, the patterns of grammar and expression that make Quechua distinct. Stories carry forward, modified over time, but maintaining threads of connection to the past. Every family has stories passed down from grandparents to grandchildren. Some stories are about the old empire, some are about resistance to the Spanish, some are about ordinary people surviving extraordinary times. They change with each telling, adapted to new contexts, but they maintain continuity. Knowledge carries forward through demonstration and practice. How to build terraces on impossible slopes, how to predict weather by watching clouds and wind patterns, how to preserve food at high altitudes, how to select and save seeds for hundreds of potato varieties. These skills don't need writing. They need people willing to teach and children willing to learn. They need hands-on transmission across generations. The bridge at Quipu is rebuilt every year, unbroken for 500 years. Through conquest, through colonialism, through Peruvian independence, through modernization and globalization, and every change that should have ended traditional practices. The ceremony continues. This is resistance, but not the dramatic kind with battles and heroes that history books celebrate. This is the quiet kind, the patient kind, the kind that outlasts empires and conquests and all attempts at cultural erasure. It's the resistance that says, you can take our land, and you did. You can take our gold, and you did. You can kill our leaders, ban our religion, forbid our language, punish our customs. You can try to erase us, but we will keep building this bridge. We will keep speaking this language in our homes. We will keep singing these songs to our children. We will keep weaving these patterns. We will keep telling these stories. And in doing so, we survive, not unchanged, not undamaged, but we survive. This is the lesson of cultural resilience. What lives in people's hearts and hands and voices cannot be conquered by force. It can only be lost if people choose to let it go, if they decide it's not worth preserving, if they stop teaching their children. As long as people remember and insist on continuing, the culture persists. The Inca Empire is gone. But Inca culture, transformed and adapted and mixed with other influences, lives on, not in temples or palaces, in languages and songs and agricultural techniques and bridge-building ceremonies and the stories grandmothers tell grandchildren about mountains that remember. That's the victory that matters more than any military conquest. I've finished my walk now. The sun is setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors that don't have names, the kind of sunset you only see at high altitude, where the air is thin enough that light behaves differently. I'm sitting on a stone that's been here for 500 years, probably longer, eating food that Kusik would recognize, looking at mountains that haven't changed since his time, since long before his time, since before humans walked these paths at all. If Kusik could see us now, I wonder what he would think. Would he recognize us as his descendants? Would he understand how we carry his story forward, transformed but not broken, adapted but not erased? I think he would understand. He lived through catastrophe, watched his daughter die of a disease no one could fight, watched the empire collapse, watched the god-king chained like an animal, watched everything he believed about divine order and cosmic structure proven false. But he survived, and he taught his granddaughter songs and language and stories. He kept memory alive in the only way that really matters, by passing it on. We lost the empire grandfather, that vast structure of organization and divine authority and roads that connected everything. It's gone. The Spanish conquered it, colonized it, transformed it into something unrecognizable. But we kept the language, we kept your songs, we kept the knowledge you passed to Kusi, and we're still here. We lost millions of people. That loss is real and enormous and can never be made right. There's no justice for genocide on that scale, no reparations that could restore what was taken. That pain echoes through generations. But we survived. Millions died, but millions also lived. And their descendants, we are still here, still fighting for land rights, still demanding recognition, still insisting that the world remember what was here before conquest. The conquest happened. We can't change that, but it didn't finish. It didn't accomplish what the conquistadors wanted, which was total erasure of indigenous identity and complete submission to Spanish culture. We're still here, still indigenous, still carrying forward the languages and customs and knowledge that colonizers tried to destroy. This isn't a story about gold or empires or dramatic battles. Those things matter historically, but they're not what makes the story meaningful. This is a story about people, about fathers who ran as fast as they could and arrived too late, about mothers who wept in silence because crying was forbidden, about children who died before they had a chance to grow, about grandmothers who kept singing when everything else was taken, about descendants who keep walking these roads, keep speaking these languages, keep building these bridges. The empire fell, but the people didn't, and that's everything. I pull out a small Quipu from my bag. It's handmade, based on museum examples and knowledge shared by elders who studied the few surviving Quipus. We're relearning how to read the knots. Some knowledge was lost when the last Quipu Cameox died without apprentices, when the Spanish burned Quipus, when the skill couldn't be transmitted. But it can be recovered, slowly, patiently, through careful study of surviving examples and oral traditions, and experimental archaeology. My daughter is 9 years old. She's learning with me. We practice together, tying knots, trying to understand the patterns our ancestors used to record their world. It's difficult. We don't have teachers who know the full technique. We're reconstructing from fragments. But we're doing it. We're bringing back knowledge that was supposed to be lost forever. This is what resilience looks like. Not dramatic resistance, not violent rebellion, just the quiet, patient work of preserving and recovering what can be preserved and recovered. Today, there are 10 million Quechua speakers across South America. Indigenous movements fight for land rights, for cultural preservation, for political representation. The roads are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, protected and studied. Archaeologists and indigenous descendants work together to understand and preserve what remains. The story continues, still being written, still unfolding. If this story touched you, learn more. Visit, if you can, respectfully. Support indigenous-led preservation efforts. Listen to the voices of descendants who carry this history, not in books, but in blood and memory and daily practice. The past isn't dead, it walks on ancient roads, speaks ancient languages, builds ancient bridges with techniques passed down through 5 centuries. For now, let this story settle into you like stones settling into a road. Rest knowing that empires fall but people endure. Sleep knowing that what matters most, love, resilience, memory, culture, the stubborn human refusal to be erased, cannot be conquered. The mountains are still there, the roads are still there, the people are still there, and that in the end is everything. Thank you for walking this road with me, my sleep club. If this helped you rest, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like on this video. It helps more people find these stories. And if you enjoyed learning about the Inca Empire and want more deep dives into fascinating history, hit that subscribe button. Tell me in the comments which part of this story touched you most, what resonated with you, or what historical topic you'd like to explore next. Share this video with someone who loves history or someone who needs a calm story to help them sleep. Every share helps keep these stories alive, just like the Quechua speakers keep their language alive, just like the bridge builders at Cajamarca keep their traditions alive. Remember, you're lying in comfort tonight because someone somewhere built something that lasted beyond their lifetime. Maybe that's what we're all trying to do, build something that outlasts us, whether it's roads or bridges or songs or stories or videos that teach and comfort. Sleep well wherever you are in the world. The stones remember. And now, so do you.